Hello one and all, and welcome back to another irregularly scheduled Gundamonium video. I hope that I find you all well today, and allow me to explain the hypothesis, the thesis, the theory behind today's video. I want you to imagine that you're standing in line at the grocery store checkout. You have 30 boxes of macaroni and cheese in your arms because they went on a great sale. Now, you're not really used to leaving your house because you're a total shut-in and talking to human beings terrifies you. However, you crawled out of your bed this morning to run down to the grocery store to secure all of the delicious macaroni and cheese. Today, however, there is an elderly person arguing with the cashier about some sort of price discrepancy. Who even knows? It doesn't matter, but the line is held up. In an attempt to pass time, the person in front of you turns around to whoever they think is a normal person standing behind them with 30 boxes of macaroni and cheese and says something innocuous like, how about the weather? And at that very moment you freeze up and your heart tenses and your heart starts beating like crazy because you're not used to social interaction. Why would someone want to talk to you? Can't they see that you're just trying to buy your macaroni and cheese and listen to your podcast about horror movies? And so your brain is scrambling and trying desperately to think of something to say to sound normal. And all you can muster is, I really like macaroni and cheese. I hope that this line goes faster. How are you? Hello today. And upon hearing that and seeing how much you started sweating and how all of your spaghetti fell out of your pocket, the person standing in line in front of you turns back around without a word. And you know that you will never forget that this ever happened to you ever again. So you pay for your boxes of macaroni and cheese. You go home dejected, climb in the bathtub, and just stare at the wall. I will not confirm nor deny whether or not this story actually happened to me. However, what I will say is that I need to harness whatever energy that is that causes not me to react this way in public and hide it in something, some sort of a little object. And I think I found that object, and it's time to make it the perfect object for me to hide all of my fears in. Put all of my social anxiety into the perfect vessel. All right, here we are. All of the pieces together, finally. The print turned out pretty okay. There are some pretty obvious delamination lines that I usually get. I think probably due to some sort of temperature change or something of the nature like that. I don't know why whenever I print something that has slots, plug-in type slots, they never really fit after the print. I don't know if this is because the resin changes sizes during the print or not, but yeah, it's been pretty consistently like that. Everything I've tried I always have to sand it or come up with a solution, but that's okay. We have a solution this time. First things first though, we got to give this little vessel a shave. Got to make sure that everything is nice and even and smooth. And to do that, of course, we got to use everyone's favorite sandpaper. This was by far the longest process. As we can see, I completely turned an entire sheet of sandpaper stark white just from resin. After everything had been nicely smoothened out and pretty even, I went back in there with a little drill bit to make some holes, to pre-cut some holes. That way we can make a much stronger bond and pin the little pieces to the main body. I then set aside all of the pieces so that the pins could dry in place and work on the holes I made in the main body. To do this, I grabbed my Tamiya 2-part epoxy resin and cut 2 relatively equal pieces and mixed them together as best as I could with my very, very, very gloved fingers. After it looked like it had been mixed together pretty well, I went ahead and just ripped off workable pieces and jammed them literally into and over the holes. I then set down the little model for around 8 hours to let the epoxy fully harden. I then decided to use some UV curing resin from Mr. Hobby to fill in the holes entirely. I feel like this is probably the best way to get a smoother surface, and honestly, I don't know. I just thought it was cool. I really like using the UV resin. Also make sure that you use some sort of a tool to make sure that no bubbles form, as we can see from me doing that with a toothpick right there. After that, I used this toy that I bought for Cookie that she never chases, that for some reason has a UV light attachment to dry all the resin in the holes that I've created. It's really, really cool. The resin basically dries to a hard surface in about 2 seconds, as we can see from me tapping on it. It's like glass. It's amazing. Because we had now created a brand new surface that was really, really uneven, we had to go back in with the highest grit sandpaper. It kind of made it look like adding the epoxy was useless because we just ended up having basically the 3 holes of the UV resin show up. But we needed the epoxy resin in order to make a little divot for the UV resin to be able to be used. So at the end of the day, it worked out quite well. With all the pre-assembly now completely done, it was time to prime. It was prime time. Prime. We just used some white Vallejo primer, blasted it through the airbrush. I was in a bit of a time rush at this point, so I threw the pieces in the oven to make sure that the primer dried really fast. It worked really well. It took about an hour. The base color was the same color that my face makes whenever I say something dumb on stream, and I just liberally sprayed it all over. Pink is kind of a really fun color to work with. I don't know how to explain it, but it looks like bubblegum. It made me want to chew bubblegum. Not the best coverage, but I mean, it's pink, so that's gonna happen. While waiting for the main body to dry, I also hand painted all of the little bits and baubles that were gonna be used to complete the whole vessel. Pretty self-explanatory at this point because I think most people know what we're going for. I think we get it. We get it. It's our social anxiety icon. I ended up adding this darker pink as a shading color because I thought that just the body being flat pink wasn't really fun, and wanted to add a bit more life overall to the whole project. But also to make sure that it wasn't too intense, I went back in with the blush pink and muted the shade color. I think it looks pretty all right. You can barely see it under certain lights, but you can definitely tell that there's more depth now on the model. Oh yeah, here we go. It's time for final assembly. To really make sure that the pieces are gonna stick, it was time to use the UV resin again, because I felt like this would make the hardest bond. And these things, they'll never go anywhere now. They're here forever. They're with us for all time, stuck to us with UV resin. For the eyes, I did just end up using the clear Elmer's glue. The clear Elmer's glue has some of the best gluing properties that I've ever experienced. I love it. I use it all the time. It's almost as good as the UV resin, honestly. Give it a try. Use it on your next building project. Why not? Any hoodles, as we can see now that I felt confident that we were all done, I gave her a little matte finish, and there you go. There's our little Shinokobochi. I can no longer continue this litho chat. I'm so sorry. But I actually printed this and made it for my friend's birthday, and it already is with him. In fact, it's been with him for about 2 months now. So it wasn't only about anxiety, it was also about love and friendship all along. It's kind of rough around the edges. I really need to work on my sanding a bit more and making sure that everything kind of looks more flush. As we can see, like you can still see some delamination lines on the one side. The other side is almost perfect, but the bottom is also pretty rough. But we're not going to look at the bottom. Don't look at the bottom. Okay? That's not why we're here. Also, I will be adding links to all of the materials that I used in this video, as well as the 3D printed file, because it's free. It's totally free on Cults. I recommend you pick it up. It's really fun to work with, and I had no issues. And the end result was really cute.